Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I'm off kilter here, aren't I? Well, I guess that's okay. Let me move this to the side a little. I'm trying to get more in the middle because, otherwise my just perfectionism will get all crazy. I wasn't going to do any streaming tonight, but then you wouldn't hear from me maybe until Wednesday because, as you know, or some of you know, particularly those of you who are in the Discord, that while I'm still searching for the ideal job, that I'm doing some seasonal stuff right now. That's 3 days a week, 10 hours a day, to try to catch up on my mortgage. And those of you who like making fun of me for being very honest about financial woes can just make fun away because you really just show yourself to be really terrible people. Not that it's any of you, my faithful audience, but it's the few trolls. The consistent 2 downvotes that will happen before the stream even starts. But I did not want to keep you guys until Wednesday because I feel a burden to the fact that I have a very dedicated listening base that is very generously my patrons, and I feel an obligation to get regular content out because this is in fact my primary job. So I guess this is a long way of saying I'm long suffering for you. No, because I didn't feel particularly well today. I dragged my ass out of bed to make sure that I did stream tonight, and I might pre-record something to be released tomorrow. Not sick with anything, not the Rona. To be honest with you, it's just stress. It's stress over this whole LNC situation. Not anything critical. Just, I'm over it, whatever will be, will be. I'm waxing poetical. I'm at the point where I just want my final status to be determined so I could just get on with dealing with it. I can deal with whatever happens, but I want to get on with dealing with it at this point. And honestly, I know the little LNC spies are going to be here to try to find, and my serial sexual harasser will be here trying to pick apart things that I say. But honestly, no matter what happens, it's a win-win for me. Because here's the thing. Nobody's perfect. I didn't go about everything the most perfect way, and I will not tomorrow, and neither will you. But I was right in this situation. Sorry, not sorry. And most people in the party agree with me. Calling out corruption isn't always pleasant or nice. And again, could have been nicer, I'm sure. I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be. So no matter what happens, it's a win-win for me. If I'm reinstated, actually, let me get a little Machiavellian here and pretend like I was an LNC member that wanted me removed. And what would I, if I were being Machiavellian, think and tactical, what I think would be the best decision? And none of them are thinking of this. And I just don't know why we don't have better political strategists in the party. If those particular people want to have the biggest chance of me not being again on the LNC, or perhaps I know some of them probably would love for me to leave the party or just not have any influence, the easiest way, if they really think I'm such a terrible person, to have that happen is for me to be reinstated. Because if I am such a terrible person, I will immediately hang myself again. And no one will ever want to elect me for anything. But they're too up in their own feels, or they don't believe I'm such a terrible person. So they're not thinking tactically. The worst thing that can happen for them is for me to lose my JC appeal. Well, maybe the second, I don't know, me winning it might be bad too. I would say me winning or me losing, actually, it going to the JC is the worst thing that can happen. Because if I lose, I enter Reno as the martyr. And I have the best chance of running. I'm going to be honest with you. My best chance at winning re-election in Reno is for me to lose my JC appeal. Because as Justin O'Donnell said, and I laughed, he's like, you're a great secretary, but you're an even better martyr. People love the hero martyr. It's just reality, and the LNC is not being tactical. If I win my JC appeal, then, of course, then you're the conquering hero, but I still have the opportunity to fuck up over the next 5 months. But if I lose, I, A, have no opportunity to fuck up, and I'm the martyr. And I do not know why nobody is sitting these people down and saying, you want to get rid of her for good? Pass this compromise. A, you won't have to deal with her till January. And if she's such a terrible person, 5 months is plenty of room. So it tells me that they actually don't believe I'm so terrible, or they're just not good political strategists. And we need good political strategists in this party. And to my horror, like, I don't like politics, but I am much more a better political strategist. And though I never take the Machiavellian route, because I think that's gross, I do not believe the ends justify the means. It just amazes me that I can see it and other people can't, particularly so far big brain political people. But anyway, at this point, it's win-win for me. It honestly is. There are some that will be better for my ego. Obviously, winning would be better for my ego, but if I put my ego aside and I'm thinking about Reno, the best thing that could happen for me is to me to lose my JC appeal. Of course, I don't want to, because I believe I'm right. I believe my appeal is just. I wouldn't have made my appeal if I didn't think it was just. But moving on to what is going on in the LNC list right now. And there's some things that are being said about the party chair that aren't fair, that I'd like to correct, and then some criticisms that are perfectly fair. I don't believe that she hasn't ruled yet on Susan Hogarth's point of order because she's delaying. That is not the reason. It's a difficult point of order. And the situation I believe she's finding herself in is that she would have asked Richard Brown, who's the party's parliamentarian, and it's a highly unusual point of order that he is not going to directly know the answer to because it's not directly covered by Roberts. Contrary to Mr. Phillips, and I hope he's watching this, and I'm not going to be mean, so don't worry. You don't need to hold on to your feelings. You are absolutely incorrect. I hope you know, no matter what your opinions are of my decorum or whatever it might be, I hope you know that I do know Roberts better than you. Not as good as other people, but better than you. And you keep citing the thing where it says that expulsions are not rescindable. I was not expelled. I was suspended. It's a unique situation. It's not a vacancy in the position until after the passage of a certain period of time or a JC ruling, neither of which have happened yet. And because they haven't happened yet, the suspension is unexecuted. And if you read that section carefully that you keep ignorantly citing, the unexecuted part of orders are fully rescindable. So it is rescindable. I'm sorry, you're just wrong. And you are already proven wrong about the vote threshold. And that was so basic that I hope, no matter what your personal feelings are, that you'll step back and reread that section and understand that you are completely wrong about this not being rescindable. It is. Now, whether this motion was the correct way to do it, there are some reasonable arguments to be made on either side. Like I said the other show, I do think the arguments that Stephen Nikela made are the most reasonable. So this is a difficult point of order. To expect Whitney to have ruled on it immediately is not reasonable and is not fair to Whitney. However, the fact that she was silent since Friday and didn't even acknowledge the point of order, she deserves criticism there. You may note in the past when I've been really busy and there was a fully sponsored motion put up, what I always did was say, oh, I see this motion. I will be starting the ballot soon. So at least the people that made the motion know that I saw it and that I'm aware of it and it's on my radar. But the chair remained silent about a point of order for 2 days, and that's a dereliction of duty. It's inexcusable. It's not inexcusable that she hasn't made a ruling yet. But once the point of order was made, she should have immediately acknowledged it. And that, because nobody even knows if she saw it. You know, when you're not in the room with other people, you've got to give some kind of feedback so that they know that you're on it. So there's reasonable criticism, which is she does this quite a bit. She does not like feeling like she has to answer to anybody. And she does. I'm sorry. She needs to not just let the LNC know she saw it. She needs to let the members know she saw it. And she doesn't like that. That is, I hope if Whitney hears this, that she'll take that to heart, to realize she needs to be better at giving a feedback loop. Okay? But the members who are saying, oh, she's just stalling. No, that's not fair. It's a difficult point of order. Now, ironically, since she ruled the ballot invalid because there was a question on sponsors, which there wasn't, that was petty, I'm sorry, and she said that's the past custom, that past custom she might not recall was overruled. That past custom was started by Francis Went being petty. It played through a couple times, and then everyone decided, just like Mr. Phillips correctly said, it's a petty game. Can we not do that anymore? And it had stopped. That technical deficiencies that don't cause any misunderstanding with people, A, on what they're voting on, or B, whether it's sufficiently sponsored, should not void a ballot. Mr. Radsub said he was listed incorrectly as a sponsor. True, but there were still sufficient sponsors even without him. Dustin Nana said, My sponsorship was conditional upon it being a majority vote threshold. Whitney clarified it was a majority vote threshold, so his sponsorship remained. Her voiding the ballot and requiring all the sponsors to reconfirm their sponsorship was petty and unnecessary. It was a game. And we need to stop that. And Mr. Phillips was absolutely correct when he said, can we not do that? So, but in any event, she's the chair. It's her prerogative. So the ballot needs to be restarted. I don't know if yet Mr. Nikela reconfirmed his sponsorship of it, but 3 other people have. Then Tim has another 2 days to start the ballot. Okay. Time is of the essence here. Hopefully he'll start it right away. And I'm sure Whitney will rule on that point of order. Oh, but the irony is because she voided the ballot, she can't even rule on it now if she wanted to, because there isn't a live motion. You can't do an advisory point of order. That's just a point of parliamentary information. She can do that. But you can't answer a point of order unless there's an actual justiciable, I always mess up that word, but there has to be an actual live controversy. And with that ballot being invalidated, right now, there isn't a live controversy until the ballot starts again. Just all these little technical things that I think some people are interested in. There's been some people on Twitter that are really interested in the mechanics of it. And something else I brought up on Twitter with somebody new who didn't know, who said, so if it's a majority, that means it needs 9 votes, which is a majority of the LNC. And I was like, no. It's very rarely that you need a majority of the entire membership of any body. It's just a majority vote. And that means a majority of those voting. If only 6 people are voting, because the rest sit it out or abstain, then it's only 4 people. Now, if all 16 people vote and none of them are abstentions, then yes, you need 9 votes. That rarely happens. There's always some abstentions. So hopefully that cleared it up. And something else I had also advised on Twitter, please, please, please drop the term simple majority from your vocabulary. There's no reason to add the word simple. It adds nothing, and it only adds ambiguity. Because, for instance, in your bylaws, Roberts assumes that you will not add an extra word unless you intend it to mean something. And since you could simply say majority by the word majority, why did you add the word simple? You must mean something different than a majority. And simple majority can be interpreted to mean plurality, because if you just meant a regular majority, you would have just said majority. So please don't get all fancy and think you're sounding more parliamentary wise by saying simple majority. It's just a majority, and there's no such thing as a 2/3 majority. 2/3 is not a majority. It's 2/3. You might call it a super majority, but it's not a majority. It's not a 2/3 majority. That makes no sense. It's like military intelligence. Okay? So hopefully I gave you some terminology hints here. But when people amend their bylaws to add the word simple in front of majority, you're messing up your bylaws. You're not making them fancier. With that out of the way, if anyone has any questions on what's going on in the LNC list, I hope the summary I just gave was fair and balanced. I'm sure the people I'm critical of will never think it's fair and balanced, but most people in the party have thought so. We're going to go on now to talking more about this wonderful book. And my bad, the author who had sent this to me, Derek Wells, he's a friend of mine. As you can see, there's his name. I should have gotten him to sign it for me. I thought I told him that I had started doing this blow-by-blow review on my channel, but apparently I hadn't. So last week or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, he wrote me and he goes, you got the book, right? Have you started taking a look at it? And I felt bad because it was a gift. And I'm like, I've been reviewing it. So now we'll check out the shows. He started watching them, but I felt so bad. I thought I told him that at the beginning. So we are now on, and in case you haven't caught any of the, okay, Samuel, let me get your comment up here. I hope you didn't think I was saying you're a simple, but were you doing a play on the word simple? Yeah, most people make that mistake. I used to make that mistake. That's why I'm so triggered by it. I thought I was being all fancy pants by saying simple majority. And then I read an article in the National Parliamentarian that said, don't ever do that. And I'm like, oops, raised my hand. That's me. And now I see everyone doing it. You know, when you get something pointed out to you, you see it everywhere. But I like to give these little tips so that your other people are equipped in the future. I do not believe the part... Okay, there's two camps in this party, and both of them are like disastrously wrong. One of those camps are the people who I call the priests of Robert's Rules of Order. And these priests like to beat the shit out of everybody else with Roberts because they know that everybody else doesn't know it as well as I do. Not as I do, as they do, because they know it better than me. I'm just kind of entering the priesthood, though, but I'm a heretic in the temple, as I say. They know most people don't know it as well as they do. And they use that to their advantage. Then there are the other people who are tired of getting beat up by the priests of Roberts who think we need to get rid of Roberts entirely. And that will be the death of protection of rights in this party. There is a completely butt-headed bylaws proposal that's being bandied about by the bylaws committee to get rid of Roberts. That proposal needs to die in a fire and be embarrassed to ever show its face again. If I end up getting any due process, it won't be because of the LNC. It will be because of Roberts. Roberts will protect your rights when your ass is on the line. It's the dumbest thing in the world to get rid of it. And you want to know something? When you get rid of a parliamentary authority, you haven't gotten rid of a parliamentary authority. Then you're just subject to general parliamentary law. And you want to know what that is? Whatever the LNC says it is. And if you think you want to trust yourself to the tender mercies of the LNC, you haven't been paying attention. And it's not just this LNC, it's any governing body. We, of all people, as libertarians should know, trusting yourself to the tender mercies of any governing body is not wise. That you want something outside of them guarding your rights. You do not want the fox guarding the hen house. So come this convention in Reno, if I am back as secretary, I will have a substitute sitting in my place to do the secretarial work for that proposal, because my ass will be on the floor arguing against it, because I'm the poster child for how your rights will get abused if you do not have an outside authority. Just telling you, please vote that down. It does not get you anything. Instead of thinking the way to combat the priests is by getting rid of the holy book, it's just to learn the book yourself. It's not hard. And that's why I always like giving these tips, because I'm equipping you against the priests. Because I don't like people who use their superior knowledge to beat up on other people. All right. We are on chapter 5 of The Liberty Solution. And it's called The Greatest Heist in History. And it's about the Fed. So I know some people right then, that was just like, you know, do I have my sound effect here? You mentioned the Fed to them, and this is what they hear.
Chicka wow wow.
They just wanted to, you know, to them, that's kink, man. We're going to talk about the Fed. I'm the first to admit, economic policy is not my libertarian kink. I'm much more into the social policies. The freedom to just, you know, live life however you want. I find economics, while very useful, not the most scintillating subject. To me, it's like reading the book of Leviticus, okay? All those begats are pretty important. You need to know who begat who. But, you know, I'd rather read the Gospel of John, if I'm going to be honest with you. But we're going to go through it now. And I did learn a lot in this chapter. And there is, before we go through some of the highlights of the chapter, I wanted to show you. At the end, there is this really, really interesting chart that shows the buying power of it's so dry in here. Like, Colorado is semi-arid. A lot of people don't know that. And your nasal passages just dry out. And I feel like it's getting all cracked. Like I'm going to get a nosebleed or something. But it says buying power of the USD relative to 1792. And I don't know how well you can see the lines in this chart. But back here is like, you know, the 1700s. And down here in the pits is now. Okay? Very interesting chart. But let's go back to the beginning of this chapter. And it's a fairly long chapter for this book. So it says if there's one thing that's sure to trigger roughly 100%, I love that, roughly 100% of libertarians, as well as a substantial percentage of conservatives, it has to be the Federal Reserve. Even libertarians who don't understand what the Federal Reserve is, and I don't think any of us really understand it, and that is like part of the problem. Shout out to Dave Smith. It is that. You know, even if we don't know it, we're like, I don't know what that is, but I don't like it. So it says, following the Revolutionary War, and y'all are going to laugh. I learned so much about like that period of American history just because I like the musical Hamilton. I learned I know Michael Malice thinks Alexander Hamilton was an American hero, but no, he wasn't. So follow the Revolutionary War, the idea of a central bank was hotly debated between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, but it was much more complex than just creating a bank. I think I have a clip that I thought was so funny that I have in my little clip library here from Hamilton, but maybe not. I might have it just in my Cultivar ONR one. Make it make sense. That's not it. That's what she said. That's not it. I thought I had it, but I had that little clip from where they're, singing about their little central bank debate, and it's that you don't have the votes. You don't have the votes. I love that. Anyway, I don't have that clip, unfortunately. Alrighty. Hamilton's view was that the public debt, if not excessive, was a blessing to the nation. Fuck you, Hamilton. Dig him up and drag him through the streets, as it would establish good credit for any willing lenders at a future date. And all the cussing I'm doing in this video, it's definitely not getting monetized. So, super chats are welcome. I got a grift. I got the grifting along the bottom here. Oh, and I forgot all about that. I got, last show, somebody, a new sponsor, helped me make up the inevitable attrition at the beginning of every month, and another one helped put me towards my October goal. So if any of you feel like that this is something you'd like to support, please consider doing so. And that's all the grifting I'm going to do for tonight. I want to continue on this book. Conversely, let me read that whole sentence because I stopped partway through. Hamilton's view was that the public debt, if not excessive, was a blessing to the nation, as it would establish good credit for any willing lenders at a future date. Conversely, Jefferson despised both the ideas of a central bank and of perpetual debt. Obviously, I much more agree with Jefferson here. By the time America's first central bank, the Bank of the United States. Now, was it Bank of the? I remember reading. And was it in Rothbard's book about... Yeah, no, this wasn't the first one. There was this bank in the early 1900s that was set up for immigrants, just called Bank of United States, and it didn't have the word "the" in it, and I always thought that was so weird, but that's not the same thing here. So, the Bank of the United States was already established. Hamilton had successfully convinced Congress and President Washington of the bank's necessity, and it was chartered for a term of 20 years. It served not only as the holder of the public debt, but also a commercial bank. So individuals, businesses could open accounts and take out loans, just like today. Now, prior to that, there was this unbacked currency called Continentals, which was worthless. So this is going to continue after this. So it says, from the collapse of the Continental currency during the Revolution all the way until after the Civil War, the United States did not have a standard paper currency. I did not know this. I thought this was so fascinating. Banks throughout the several states would issue banknotes in lieu of gold and silver coin, and we had a bimetal currency then. Could be backed in either silver or gold when loans were issued. This way, they could keep real money in reserve should someone come along wishing to make a withdrawal. The banknotes were effectively the same as paper currency today, but they each bore the name of the bank of the issue on its face. So it was like very specific to that bank. So this resulted in Wayne's washing the dishes. So if it sounds like a river is flowing ahead, I don't know if I'm the only one who could hear that. Maybe this mic's not picking it up, but it is so distracting to me. This resulted in confusion and frustration throughout the nation. Notes issued by Bank A would not be accepted by Bank B, but at a discount to cover the costs associated with transferring the notes back to Bank A in exchange for gold. So there was like a little exchange fee. So a $20 note in New York was worth less than $20 outside of New York. So unease grew when the power of this bank came to light. Though it was never officially charged with the power of setting monetary policy or even controlling state banks, their power in connection to the federal government allowed them to do that very thing. It allowed the Bank of the United States to control the number of notes and issuance, thus controlling the value of the dollar. And he goes on to ask here, what's the problem? Should not the interests of the nation not want to control inflation? Throughout history, every attempt to control the will of the free market, both maliciously and benevolently, has been met with long-term negative consequences. What made these attempts unique was that it was done by an entity that was 80% owned by private investors, and their de facto control over every bank in the country definitely warranted concern. And Mike, doing a little bit better, it's kind of forced, because this is my job. I got to do my job, right? Because, as you know, I have my 2 10-hour days, Monday and Tuesday, and I will not be doing any live streams. Though I might, after this, pre-record some of this, the right to ignore the state, which will make me happy. It's just, bless my little anarchist heart. I might do some of this pre-record. Oh, I know something I need to pre-record. Dun, dun, dun. Our ballots. And, Wayne did the research on the school board people for me, so he recommended who to vote for because I didn't do the research this time. So maybe I'll do my little ballot thing. Anyway, sorry, so distracted. All right, so we got there. So you understand what's going on now up through the Civil War, at least in basic, because obviously I'm just giving you the highlights here, the Sparks notes. So then, from 1836 to 1863, all banks in the U.S. were state chartered. And it says in Michigan, they didn't even need to be chartered at all. Kind of like that. The number of banks in the U.S. boomed, and reports of thievery, swindling, and conning by bankers began to increase as well. And the era was dubbed by historians as wildcat banking, and most writing on the subject highlights the victims of con artists due to lack of state oversight and the state's failure to address the issue of banks purchasing notes of competitors at a discounted rate. Like most things throughout history, however, the volume of these counts seems to be exaggerated. Of course it was, because it would be to serve a purpose of giving the state more control. Then the Civil War happened, and as happens, money got devalued during the war. So the value of the dollar slowly recovered, and that's why the chart in the back starts from 1792. Let me just read this because he'll explain it. So the value of the dollar slowly recovered after the war, taking until 1885 to get back to 99% of its original 1792 value. That explained it better. State banks also began making a comeback into existence, and the mandate set by the National Bank Acts requiring the face value exchange of national notes helped the dollar recovery. One aspect that delayed recovery was the issuance of fiat currency. Yippee-yay, that was not redeemable for gold, known as greenbacks, to help pay for the war effort, though in 1873, Congress ended the bimetal standard and put the U.S. dollar firmly on the gold standard. The dollar continued to rise until 1897, when it settled at 116% of its 1792 value, then slowly began creeping back down until 1914 with the establishment of the Federal Reserve System and the outbreak of World War I. All right. Oh boy, so it says, when currency was invented to serve as a representation of money, the dawn of perpetual debt became inevitable. Bankers only had so much gold in their vaults, but they had an endless supply of paper. Throughout the eras of banking prior to the Federal Reserve's implementation, bankers would at least be compelled to minimize how many excess notes they printed. Too many non-backed notes would have detrimental consequences to the bank itself at the very least. In today's post-monetary era, and maybe that's a common phrase, like I just never paid attention before, but to call us a post-monetary era, because it's really backed by nothing, is very apropos. These laws need not apply, and that brings us to the creation of the Federal Reserve System and the Panic of 1907. And I know that Rothbard's got a good book on that, and that might be what I was thinking about with that immigrant, the Bank of United States that mostly served the New York immigrant community. So it says, in the years that follow, history says that the nation's leading bankers sought to prevent or at least control the types of events that led to the Panic of 1907. To do this, control was not really needed over the banks themselves, but over the currency instead. Essentially, the mentality was that if the state could put people's minds at ease that their quote-unquote money would always be there, even if their bank disappeared overnight, then bank runs would become a thing of the past. With that kind of control over the nation's currencies, the banks would be controlled by default. And of course, bank runs, not something you really want to happen, but it's not this implosive national disaster without, and this is coming up, fractional reserve banking. So less than two. Okay, they first talked about how it was the Republicans that originally wanted the Federal Reserve. Then when a Democrat president advocated for it, then just it switched on partisan lines just because they were partisan lines, and it was kind of bizarre. So it talks about the secret meeting in which the Federal Reserve was created during this duck hunt, as it said. But it gets to this shift. It says a baffling paradigm shift between the two major political parties happened seemingly instantaneously. Because a Democratic president called for the establishment of a central bank, Democrats now supported it and Republicans now opposed it. Principles. 2 days following the president's speech to Congress, Democratic Congressman Carter Glass of Virginia introduced H.R. 7837 in the House with the short title, the Federal Reserve Act. Fully explaining how the Fed works is not an easy task, and some would argue that's not even possible. I would be the one that's arguing it's not even possible. The entire Federal Reserve System is so convoluted and complex that despite literal volumes upon volumes of writings on the subject, it's unlikely that anyone could really know all of its inner workings. And isn't that scary? It's in reading shit like this that I just have no hope. I get very, very black-pilled when I read stuff like this. And then, I forget about it and get white-pilled again. But still. The problem... Okay, originally, people were... This one Congressman Fest said that Glass bill gave too much power to the federal government. It really doesn't, though. It says the problem with that statement is that the Federal Reserve is a private bank that's not part of any branch of the federal government. It has a .gov website, a fancy flag, a great seal, and all 7 members of the Board of Governors are nominated by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate for a 14-year term, but it is not a government entity in any official capacity. They're required by law to meet 4 times per year, but typically meet 8 times, always behind closed doors. And the biggest news coming out of there is the interest rate, and that's all anyone seems to care about. It says every note printed by the Treasury now says Federal Reserve note on it because the Treasury does not control the printing of currency. The Fed does. The Treasury regularly sells bonds to anyone willing to buy them. Bonds are nothing more than a promissory note for a loan from the buyer, which gets repaid with interest after it matures. When the Fed wants to increase the currency supply, it takes custody of X number of Treasury bonds, and the Treasury prints that amount in currency. That currency is then sent to the federal banks to hold for loans to its member banks. This increases the supply of currency in circulation and devalues the dollar. After those bonds mature, the Treasury has to pay the Fed. My God, the value of those bonds plus interest. The Fed never actually paid for those bonds, however. It merely took custody of them. This means that not only is the Fed the holder of the national debt, it owns the national debt via a complex money laundering scheme. And boy, that's what it is. And now we're getting to fractional reserve banking. Another major power the Fed and subsequently its member banks has is a process known as fractional reserve banking. This is another means by which the banks themselves create money out of thin air. The Fed establishes reserve requirements for its member banks, which is a mandate for the amount of cash the bank is required to keep on hand as a percentage of its deposits. This is currently set by the Fed at 10%. For banks with transaction amounts of more than 124.2 million, which means that should a bank have 250 million in transaction accounts, they're only required to keep 25 million in cash. So he gives a good example of how this creates money out of thin air. And you're right, Glory, it's outrageous. Like when you see it on paper, you're like, and people like went for that. What a straight face. We're just dumb that we don't riot. Like, why aren't we revolting on the streets? The freaking Revolutionary War, they were upset about tea. And we have this shit going on. But check this out. This example he gave was so great on how fractional reserve banking creates money out of thin air. It says you have a $100 bill. You deposit into a new bank account. The bank takes your $100 and loans Joan $90 from your account, replacing the $90 in your account with IOUs. Your balance still shows $100, but John now has $90. I said Joan. Let's just say Joan because I messed up. But Joan now has $90 in cash and buys a widget from Robert for that price. Robert then deposits that $90 into his bank, and the bank then loans Stacy $81 from Joan's account, again replacing the $81 in her account with IOUs. This process repeats, and repeats. Magically, your $100 deposit has created an additional $1,000 of IUOs that never exist. IOUs, I mean, not IUOs. I can't even. This is clown world. This can't last. So, and here's something I did not know. During the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, the Fed removed all reserve requirements for all banks, regardless of their transaction accounts, allowing them to lend out 100% of the cash they have on hand. It's not even just, there's no fractional reserve. It's zero reserve now. Quite literally, every dollar currently in circulation is just a representation of debt, both the state's and yours. So today, because of the Federal Reserve's existence, the dollar has lost 96.28% of its 1792 value and shows exactly zero signs of any sort of recovery. What $100 can purchase in 2020 could be bought for $3.72 in 1792. Because this devaluation is caused by an entity's direct interference and control, this is unequivocally theft. True. When the Fed came into existence, they were given a total monopoly on U.S. currency, fueled by an endless revenue stream from income tax. The only thing that initially kept the Fed in check was the gold standard. They could play with and control the amount of notes being printed, but there was a limit. But in 1971, and this is one of the direct reasons for the creation of the Libertarian Party, so this is really coming into like my bailiwick, though it wasn't the big thing. Some people say that the one spark that made the founders of the party finally pulled the trigger was the removal from the gold standard? It wasn't. It was on August 17th, I think the date is right, when Nixon instituted wage and price controls. Related item, but not the same thing. So in 1971, President Nixon found the solution to the money problem. Eliminated. Whammo, bammo. In what was dubbed the Nixon shock, President Nixon ordered the Treasury to no longer back the dollar by gold or by anything. The $27.8 trillion debt is based off the devalued dollar, so any solution that could be proposed to fix it must eliminate the debt entirely first. Where banking has always gone wrong is their ability to issue out notes in excess of their total accounts and only keep a small amount in reserve. This is legalized counterfeit, regardless of whether the Federal Reserve does it or a bank does it with fractional reserve banking. And that right there is the doom of our nation. It cannot last. This is worse than Enron. Like, the things we get outraged about. We're not, I mean, libertarians get all lathered up about this, but everyone should be. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. How long can we keep, like, the ostrich head in the sand? So, sorry, I didn't mean to slam down the book before telling you what would be coming up next, even though that's all we're doing tonight for this book. Chapter 6 is entitled The Privilege of Life. I have no idea what it's about. I know whenever anyone sees that, unfortunately, in our political climate today, they immediately think it's going to be about abortion. It might be. I don't know. I didn't read ahead. I'm just reading you the title. And it probably isn't, but unfortunately, that's just what people are going to think. This is a much shorter chapter, 91. It's barely over 10 pages. So, like the show before this one that we did on this book, where we did 2 chapters at a time. Let me see how long the next one is. Yeah, we'll probably do 2 at a time. So the one after that is chapter 7 is the injustice system. So we'll probably do both of those next time. And there had been quite a gap since the last time I had done a chapter of this because of the whole JC thing, which has just really put my life in an uproar. Before we go, though, because I haven't done this in a bit, I do want to remind you, particularly because Christmas is coming, of one of the sponsors is this wonderful children's book that teaches the young person in your life the lesson that life is not just like being alive, it's actually living, like having a life that has risks, that life isn't perfectly safe. So this is a fantastic, I loved it, me personally. Like, I wouldn't have agreed to sponsor it if I didn't like it. He gave me a copy and had me read it before I agreed to sponsor it, and I love the artwork. So if you're looking for a nice gift to give for a young relative, or just even a grab bag gift, if you're a school teacher, you know there's always those, sometimes you have the gift exchanges. It's not terribly expensive. It's a great libertarian-oriented book without being obviously libertarian, and obviously for kids. It's not obviously political, but it will put a lesson in their life. A lot of us will remember books that we read like when we were really young and they made an impact on our life. This could be one of those books for a young person in your life. So I hope that you will consider it. You can get it on Amazon. It's called The Tale of Two Brothers by Sean Dempsey of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. Or you could get it at his website, tale2brothers.com. All right, everyone, that's going to be it for tonight. I have timely updated my closing credits so that my new sponsors, my new patrons are on there. And I do thank you so much because of just the hecticness of this month. Haven't really been e-bagging enough, as some people call it. So probably not going to meet the October goal, but you never know. If you've been thinking about becoming a patron of this show and you can swing it, I would really appreciate it if you did at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. All right, y'all. Next live stream will probably be Wednesday evening because I am doing some seasonal work over the next 2 days. All right. Bye, everyone.
Gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business.